On the Build Show today, we're talking hose bibs. I got a master plumber with us. We're gonna talk about 3 ways that you can plumb for a hose bib. And guess what? I'd be willing to bet that you might have been doing it wrong. Today's Build Show all about hose bibs. Let's get going. Okay guys, we're talking hose bibs. I got Eric Aune with me. Eric's a master plumber up here in Minnesota. 30 years of experience. You've obviously dealt with these a lot. I call this a hose bib. What do you call it?
I call it a silcock.
Okay, same basic thing. This is what you're connecting your hose to on the outside of the house. And this is a model that's been around on the market for a long time, right?
Longer than you and I have combined have been in the industry.
Okay, so there's a valve in here which shuts off the water with this handle at the top. Yep. And this is shutting off the water outside of the house.
Right.
Which may be fine if you're living in the Bahamas where it doesn't freeze, but in everywhere else where you get a freezing spell, you could have a frozen water line here, or even worse, water that freezes enough that it bursts a pipe, right?
I see it all the time.
Yeah, pretty standard. Now, when I was building houses in the 90s, this was our setup on the outside, and then on the inside, in the basements of the houses I was building, we'd have this shutoff valve with a bleeder. And I would tell my clients, hey, in the wintertime, October 1, let's say, come out into your basement, come down into your basement, shut off that shutoff valve, turn that thing so that the water from here is shut off to the hose bib, and then turn the bleeder valve to let air in, right?
Yep.
Am I saying that right?
Yeah, and in the meantime, you have to go outside. So now we're running around like a fire drill.
Yeah.
And we got to open this up and disconnect the hose so it's open.
That's right.
And now the water will hopefully drain out all the way and be dry.
Yep.
Right?
Hopefully being the key word, right?
Hopefully for my clients, because I tell you what, I repair broken silcock lines all the time.
Yep.
Every spring.
Yep.
Every spring.
Okay, so this we've done since my whole 30-year career in building. To me, a newer product, although not new to you, are these 2 styles of silcock or hose bib. Talk to me about why those are different than this.
Yeah, so these are called Frostproof or Freezeproof. We just call them Frost Freeze, I guess that's what I've always called them. But these are different, and you can see just right away, way longer, right? So this is gonna take up a lot more space. But why it's taking up more space is because the shutoff is way back here. And in theory, this is installed so that this pipe never has water in it, except for when you're running the hose.
Because it actually shuts off, there's a long stem in here, and when I turn this handle, it's actually shutting it off way back inside the wall. So in theory, it would be shut off inside the warm part of the house. And then this up here is a vacuum breaker, correct?
Yeah, a little vacuum breaker, yeah.
I guess they actually call it anti-siphon on the top.
Yep.
So that now the water this should be installed with a little bit of slope on it so the water will drain out and fall out. So this would just be air in here. So in the wintertime, again, you have to disconnect your hose. You don't disconnect your hose, you're in trouble. It's gonna freeze no matter what. And then once it's drained, you could turn it back off, or you're gonna leave it off, obviously. And now there's no water to freeze in there.
Yeah. Well, in theory, that's great. And it does work. It absolutely does work.
Meaning we could eliminate this, right? And so people, builders, me, have been installing these just without this.
Right. I don't like that here in the cold climates, and anybody watching in the upper United States, North America, is gonna look at that and go, oh, no, Matt, you gotta have at least a valve like this, right? Here's why. It's kind of that belt and suspenders approach. People don't like to winterize things because it's not in the front of their mind.
True.
Right? And then people who are good at winterizing things are usually the people that have had to call me to repair from the last time that they didn't winterize things. Yeah. The other thing is this, let's be honest, you're relying on, against physics, all odds, the weather, Minnesota here, it gets very, very cold, this tiny little rubber gasket.
That's the only thing that's stopping the water at the end of one of these frost-free hose bibs, right?
It is, and in my experience, that whole install it at an angle so it can drain out. You turn the water off to this, let's say there's no hose connected, water drips for a few seconds because you're actually just draining this pipe.
Yep.
How my mind works is, oh, I didn't turn it off, and I crank it harder. And that's what my homeowners are doing all the time. Look, it's just human nature.
So they're stressing this.
They're stressing it over and over, and they're like, oh my gosh, a little harder. And then it stops, and they think, well, that must have been what it needed. And in fact, that's not what it needed. It just needed a couple more seconds, right?
To drain out.
So relying on this little thing, look, these are great. I wouldn't call out the manufacturer and say they make a bad product at all, but they're relying on this tiny little washer. And like I said, I don't want this to be what breaks a pipe in my house.
There's an expiration date to that.
I'd say.
It may not be next week, it may not be even a decade, but there is some date when this is not going to be as flexible as it was today.
Look, I don't know anybody that lives in a house with either type of these faucets that's maybe 20, 30, 40 years old that doesn't have a drip, right? Yep. Most people just screw their hose onto it with a nozzle on the end and like it doesn't drip anymore, right?
It's fine.
It's fine. It's just a little rubber washer. What I do like is that belt and suspenders approach. We're gonna at least do a valve like this. Little tiny drain on it, not awesome. My customers, especially the older they are, the harder this setup is.
You gotta have some pretty good dexterity, right?
Yeah, and of course, when they built the house, they put a whole bunch of pipes next to each other because it was pretty, made a good Instagram video. And then all of a sudden, how do you get a bucket in there? Like, how am I supposed to catch the water and we're making a mess? Or it's way up in the ceiling.
And it's peeing all over you as you're turning it off.
Yeah, the air exchanger was installed here, but before that, the plumber put the valve there, and now all of a sudden we can't even get to it, or we don't know where it is. I got a solution to that. And it's this right here. So this is a little more expensive, right? But it is just a ball valve, but different because it has a hose connection on it.
That's really nice.
I love this because it's way easier. Throw a little garden hose on, put the bucket down here, drain it into a bucket.
You also have a much bigger handle to open up.
Yep.
How much more are we talking? Is this twice as expensive?
Yeah, for sure it's twice. But guess what? This is, let's call this $25. Let's call that $50.
So it's not that big a deal in the scheme of things.
I don't know. I mean, being able to be confident you drained your system down really well. Not having a broken pipe.
Yeah, and this is going to last in the decades, not in the years.
My customers always lose this little cap. I have a baggie of these in my van.
Do you really?
And I look around for missing caps, and I just put them on for them. I'm not even going to charge them. I'm there. I know they're going to be missing this cap.
That's
right?
awesome.
And so I think it's a courtesy.
Yep.
It's a bonus that Aune Plumbing offers their
fantastic.
customers, free drain caps. No, but really these are nicer. They're more reliable in my opinion. You get them in any kind of connection. Of course, that one's a press connection. This one too. You can get it threaded, sweat, PEX, you name it.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that most builders in the South aren't even doing this. And we're not doing this either. We're just relying on a sock or a cover to keep those hose bibs from freezing. And that freeze we had, I don't know what it was, 3 winters or so ago, almost everybody in my neighborhood had a frozen hose bib.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a problem until the heat came back on and that split in the pipe then started draining water into the house at full pressure. And it was a nightmare. It was really hard to get a plumber out.
In that scenario, it is very hard, and because it all happened at once. But in that scenario, think about it this way. If you have a valve, no matter what, you can isolate just that line. And let's say that was the only thing that froze in your house and that natural disaster is what it was, right? Well, now you can turn the plumbing on and still operate.
Yes.
If you don't have a way to isolate this, now you got to wait for the plumber. Seems pretty like a no-brainer to me.
Seems like a no-brainer.
It is to me because it's only ever been that way in my career. I mean, it's always cold in Minnesota, so we've always done this. But I think it's a good practice regardless. And like we've already pointed out, it's not like it costs a lot of money.
No. So in summary, consider a frost-free hose bib that's going to shut back into the house, and also use an isolation valve, potentially even one that's got a little bit bigger handles on it and has a nice connection for your hose bib to actually come in there. So now we can drain this somewhere that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Especially if you don't have a basement. If this is a slab on grade house, this would be really handy to have. Really appreciate it, Eric.
Thanks for having me, man.
Guys, if you're not familiar with Eric Aune, he's got a great YouTube channel. He's posting videos all the time on Instagram at Mechanical Hub. He's got a killer podcast. And oh, by the way, we shot, while I was here in Minnesota visiting him, a series of videos called Talking Trades, where we're talking about the opportunity for young people to join us in the trades, and in particular, the success that Eric's found in the plumbing trade. So check that out, coming soon to a video near you. That being said, you know how I close it up, right? Follow us on TikTok or Instagram, otherwise we'll see you next time on The Build Show.